Blue and purple have long been revered colors associated with wealth, royalty, and divinity. Blue and purple are not available as earth colors, which can provide the yellow, orange, red, brown, and black colors. In humanity's first forays into painting, the colors blue and purple are notably absent. This includes the caves of Maros, Indonesia, Altamira, Spain, Lascaux, France, Wanrendong, China, and countless others around the world. With very few exceptions, blue pigments must be manufactured and are thus man-made or artificial. The only notable exceptions are azurite and lapis, which are exceedingly rare compared to earth pigments or even plant lakes. Each different civilization's artists had to contend with and solve the absence of blue. This includes the use of indigos in India and Mesoamerica, Egyptian blue, or Cuprivea in Egypt, and today's focus, so-called Han blue and Han purple of China. Today, we are going to cover Han blue and Han purple's history, how they are made, and demonstrate how they were used to color the famous terracotta warriors. The Han colors are the second synthetic pigments developed. They succeed the development of Egyptian blue by 2,500 years. There have been no artifacts of Egyptian blue that have been found in China, and there's not any evidence of the influence of Egyptian blue on the development of Han blue or Han purple. The earliest archaeological evidence of the Han colors is from the southeast of Gansu province, China, on a series of beads dating to the beginning of the spring and autumn period, which was around 770 to 476 BCE. The spread of the Han colors followed the development of the Qin Empire and is connected with developments of Taoist alchemy and glass production. The production of barium-copper silicates is closely related to artificial jade glasses produced by the Taoist monks. The monks produced 5 different colored glasses with 5 different stones. With the singular addition of a malachite or azurite containing copper, Han blue and Han purple could have been discovered. It is not 100% certain which was developed first, and different archaeologists offer different accounts. They were likely produced either at a similar date or within a couple hundred years of each other. It is quite difficult to determine which was produced first, largely in part because they are most commonly found together and with other similar copper barium silicates that have a much higher number and complexity than the copper silicates like Egyptian blue and Egyptian green. Han blue is also much more stable than Han purple, and some of the Han blue noted with Han purple could be from decomposition of the unstable Han purple. Even during manufacture, Han purple, if heated with too much flux or too hot, can decay into Han blue and red copper oxide, leading to a much more red and less blue color. The temperatures and compositions of the Han colors are much more precise and difficult to achieve than Egyptian blue. This combined with the need for barium compounds, which are comparatively much more rare than the other required minerals, are possible explanations for the later date of production of Han blue and purple than Egyptian blue and Egyptian green. Occurrences of Han blue and Han purple are also much rarer outside of China than Egyptian blue is outside of Egypt, which was quite widespread. There are a few beads and pieces of glass found in Japan, but no evidence in the Korean peninsula. The colors have not been found to have been spread through major trade routes or the Silk Road, largely due to the collapse of the production of barium-copper silicates at the end of the Han Dynasty, where the Chinese Empire was fractured and divided again before the Silk Road. This was almost the end of the production of Han blue and Han purple, and actually was the end for almost 2,000 years until the rediscovery by researchers Fitzhugh and Zeicherman in the 1980s and 1990s respectively. The foundational research for the pigments was theorized about 40 years previous, but it wasn't until these researchers that they conclusively reconstructed the pigments. Since the pigments' rediscovery, research has uncovered more and more artifacts throughout China made with Han blue and Han purple. The most famous example is the terracotta warriors of Huang. We will cover how the terracotta warriors were painted after we discuss how Han blue and Han purple are manufactured. Han blue and Han purple are 2 related compounds that are barium-copper silicates. They consist of a few different important parts and vary in manufacture. The main components are a silica source, a copper source, a barium source, and an optional flux. For the silica source, very fine quartz sand is used. For the copper source, we use malachite or copper carbonate. For the barium, there is large debate as to what was used historically, either barium sulfate or barium carbonate. Barium sulfate is much more difficult to use and prevents many problems that barium carbonate does not. So here, we will be using barium carbonate. Historically, lead flux was used to lower the heat needed for the reaction from a lead salt. But with modern electric heating, we can be very precise with the reaction temperature and get it high enough where it is not necessary and will thus be omitted. For all reactants, they should be as fine as possible, preferably 325 mesh or higher. For accurate weighing, all materials should be dried at a low temperature for accurate measurements. For measuring, we will want to be precise to 2 decimal places. We will work with a 100-gram batch size, but this can be scaled down or up at these ratios. For Han blue, the formula is 1 barium, 1 copper, 4 silica, and 10 oxygen, where the reaction is 2 barium carbonates plus 1 malachite and 8 silica makes 2 Han blue, 3 carbon dioxide, and 1 water. These are what are called molar ratios, where they are based on the molecular weight of each molecule. For these to be practical, we convert them to grams based on their molecular weight. Barium carbonate in particular is 197.335 grams per mole. Malachite is 221.114 grams per mole, and quartz sand is 60.083 grams per mole. So for a 100-gram batch of Han blue, we need 36 grams of barium carbonate, 20.17 grams of malachite, and 43.83 grams of quartz sand or silica. For Han purple, the molecular formula is 1 barium, 1 copper with 2 silica and 6 oxygen, with a simplified reaction of 2 barium carbonates plus 1 malachite and 4 silica makes 2 Han blue, 3 carbon dioxide, and 1 water. So for a 100-gram batch of Han purple, we need 46.1 grams of barium carbonate, 25.83 grams of malachite, and 28.07 grams of quartz sand or silica. Now I say this is the simplified reaction because the reality is that Han purple structure is notably less stable than the Han blue structure. Owing to a copper-copper bond, Han purple is chemically labile, or unstable, and through various measures decays into Han blue and cuprous oxide. Han purple will decay in weak acid, with contact to sulfur dioxide in the air, and with excessive heat. Han blue, on the other hand, is stable under these conditions. At 1200 C, Han purple will completely decay into a green-black glass, where Han blue will become damaged, but not irreparably so. Next, we can mix a batch of Han purple to demonstrate how it is made, with Han blue being very similar. With our weighed out materials here, we will want to put them in our mortar and thoroughly mix them with our pestle. The more thoroughly they are mixed, the more thoroughly they will react to achieve an even and ideal color. To incorporate them, we will slowly grind and mix the mixture. We will continue grinding until it is an even color and there are no visible clumps. Historically, the materials would be tightly packed into high-fire clay pots, but we will use an alumina crucible. We will be firing these in an electric kiln with an oxidization atmosphere, just meaning a basic fire. The basic fire schedule is a slow ramp up to 400 C with an hour-and-a-half hold to degas the malachite and barium carbonate. We will then ramp up to 800 C, hold for 2 hours, ramp to 1000 C, and hold for 14 hours for Han purple and 28 hours for Han blue. Once the firing schedule is finished, we will let them naturally cool as slowly as possible. Out of the kiln, we can see our pigment is solidified and requires grinding. Generally, with silicates, the finer the grind, the lighter the pigment will be. So we want a fineness that is workable, but not one that is too light. Now, one of the intricacies of Han colors that is similar to other kiln pigments is repeated firing then grinding cycles can improve the qualities of the pigment. I have here some samples of Han blue and Han purple that have undergone 1 cycle, 2 cycles, and 3 cycles. For Han purple, each refire darkens it substantially. The biggest color shift happens from the first to second firings. The color moves from slightly greenish blue to a redder, deeper blue. The third firing continues pushing the color redder, but lowers the blueness slightly, producing a warmer, violet-leaning purple while remaining very saturated. The third firing continues pushing the color redder, but lowers the blueness slightly, producing a warmer violet-leaning purple while remaining very saturated. From first to third firing, Han purple becomes 23% more saturated, 21% more blue, around 270% more red, and 33% darker. For Han blue, the second firing increases saturation and pushes the color slightly more red while also making it noticeably more blue. The third firing darkens the pigment while keeping it very blue, but it loses most of the red shift seen in the second firing. From first to third firing, Han blue becomes 15% more saturated, 15% more blue, around 13% less red, and around 11% darker. To further complicate things, we return to the Han purple reaction. Recall, at high temperatures or excess reaction time, Han purple degrades into red cuprous oxide and Han blue, with a reaction of 6 Han purple making 2 Han blue, 3 barium silicate, 2 cuprous oxide, and 2 oxygen. At temperatures of more than 1050 C, this decomposition occurs quite rapidly. In ancient China, the increased red cuprous oxide levels could not be avoided. However, with modern electric kilns, purities of over 99.5% can be achieved with what would be impossible in a fuel-fired kiln. For the redder hues, we can simulate the historical samples with admixtures of pure Han purple and red cuprous oxide. The remaining issue is how much cuprous oxide. The various artifacts made with Han purple have variable levels of cuprous oxide, and mixtures of Han blue, Han purple, silicates, and other minerals and lead salts. We can simplify this and simulate various ratios of our Han purple with cuprous oxide and use the one closest to historical samples. Here I have ratios of Han purple to red cuprous oxide at 100 to 0, 99 to 1, 95 to 5, 90 to 10, 85 to 15, 80 to 20, 50 to 50, and 0 to 100, meaning pure cuprous oxide. With the addition of red cuprous oxide, the color shifts significantly more red, significantly less blue, less chromatic, and slightly deeper. The closest ratio to average historical samples is 95 to 5. Compared to pure Han purple, the simulated historical Han purple is actually 17% lighter, 147% more red, 29% less blue, and 22% less saturated. This is the closest approximation of the pigment used to cover some of the famous terracotta warriors of Qin Shi Huang. Next, we will cover the terracotta warriors in depth before demonstrating how they were painted with Han purple and other pigments. The terracotta warriors of Qin Shi Huang are often called the eighth wonder of the world. The mausoleum holds 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots with 520 horses, and 150 cavalry. There are even non-military figures, including officials, acrobats, strongmen, and musicians. The advanced technological knowledge and incredible skills of the artisans that created the terracotta warriors is astonishing. Each sculpture is entirely unique. They are even larger in scale than real life, but they were incredibly made and fired in one piece. The sculptures were then coated with true Asian lacquer in 1 to 4 layers containing various mixtures of grounds, including calcium carbonate derived from lime. On the top of this glossy surface, the sculptures were painted with vibrant colors applied in a single thick layer, such that the brush strokes remained visible. This impasto was used for detailing the surfaces, emphasizing facial features, or creating the thread structure of garments. They sometimes could even imitate structures, such as the bird's feathers or decorative silk borders. For the individual figures, most would have had brightly colored robes, pants, and leggings, with contrasting trim at the collars, lapels, cuffs, and other decorative elements, creating rich color contrast. The brightly colored clothing of the Qin figures shows the true portrayal of the Qin people's preference for bright clothing. This differs drastically from the Qin rulers' ideology of wearing entirely black, which was considered noble. While today the terracotta warriors are mostly colorless, similar to the Greek and Roman marbles, this was not originally the case. Originally, they were brightly painted in reds, purples, blues, whites, browns, and greens. Before being painted in color, the terracotta warriors were first painted with 1 to 4 layers of a neutral or white ground layer before a single layer of paint was applied with a thickness of just 0.01 to 0.2 millimeters. The pigments used were not only Han purple and Han blue, but also red cinnabar, lead minium, apatite or bone white, and cerussite or lead carbonate for the red and pink sections, azurite and malachite for the green areas, and earth colors and possibly natural grounds for the browns and grays. Some of the areas containing lead have very small amounts that possibly indicate the lead was used as a chemical dryer rather than majority pigment. For the green areas, azurite and malachite very frequently occur together in nature and likely were not added together purposefully, but rather minerals containing both were used. For the pink flesh tones, heat-treated bone white was used with some amount of cinnabar, minium, and lead carbonate. Some of these areas also show possible evidence of lake pigments or dyes used, but they have likely degraded and further research is being conducted to confirm or deny this possibility. For the violet and purple areas, Han purple containing various levels of cuprous oxide and some level of other barium-copper silicates was used, mixed sometimes with some cinnabar to achieve the desired violet. For these pigments, the binder used varied between the ground layer and the paint layers. The mineral colors used in the ground layers were bound using true lacquer from the Asian lacquer tree, aptly from the genus Toxicodendron. This tree lacquer contains urushiol, which is also found in poison ivy and poison oak, and is what causes the allergenic rash from contact with these plants. This lacquer has been continually used throughout Asia for thousands of years. For the terracotta warriors, this lacquer was possibly mixed with up to 15% additives of starches, gums, or glues to enhance adhesion, application, and durability. The following paint layers are also very interesting compared to other statue painting throughout China in the same time period, in that they do not use lacquers like the ground layers, but either egg tempera using egg yolk or glue-based binders from animal hides. The binders used for the paint layers of the terracotta warriors have been hotly debated since around 2008. Originally, it was thought they were made with just egg yolk, but experimental research and further investigation found this to be unlikely. Through my own experiments, egg yolks are extremely difficult to use as sole binder and extremely fragile and unwieldy compared to adding glue. I made an example here where an opaque and thick enough layer of paint rendered the paint layer entirely unstable and flakes and cracks from lack of adhesion and lack of flexibility. This makes the paint just crack and flake right off. The thick tempera layer is extremely fragile and inflexible, so it creates these large cracks when it dries. These pieces flake off with ease. With an addition of glue, the tempera becomes quite strong, but on this wooden test piece you can see the egg and glue side is much deeper and less smooth than the pure glue side, which is much lighter in color, more vibrant, and less bumpy. A study released just a few months ago in April 2025 by researchers Ma Yang, Zhao Yang, Zhang Shengxin, Chuhan Yu, Zhu Si Huang, and Fu Chan Li used advanced fatty acid stable isotope analysis to determine that it was highly likely that bovine glue was used as the paint binding medium. Other earlier studies suggested eggs, dairy, fish glue, and other binders, but they found these to be less likely in their analysis. This binder is quite different from the miniature terracotta army found in Qingzhou, China, which used lacquer and gums throughout all layers. Next, we are going to demonstrate how the paint was prepared and applied to the terracotta warriors. The Qin terracotta figures are made from a ceramic or clay substrate. This ceramic substrate is a specific mixture between two different sources, a fine, darker clay mixed with a lighter, more silty clay to produce a mixture with the desired functional and aesthetic properties. A sand temper was also added that increased the toughness of the clay, allowed it to dry more thoroughly by creating pores for air and moisture to move through, and made the clay more sculptable by making it less sticky. The clay statues were then formed and fired to below 850 C or cone 013. Here we have some terracotta tiles that have been formed, fired, and smoothed to the correct level of smoothness to replicate the exterior of the terracotta warriors. This clay is higher in iron oxide, which gives it its orange color. For this clay base, we have to prepare our lacquer layer. We will be using a shellac-based lacquer rather than true lacquer from the Asian lacquer tree, as shellac does not contain urushiol, which causes the severe rash like from poison ivy. Shellac comes from the lac insect, Caryolaca. That is a scale insect similar to kermes and cochineal, but native to India and Southeast Asia. It too has been used for thousands of years to seal and coat wood, pottery, and also to dye clothes, such as the shirt I'm wearing today. We'll use a dark brown shellac that will closely resemble the color and surface qualities of true lacquer. To make shellac, we have to first dissolve our shellac flakes in high-proof alcohol. Here, we will be using denatured alcohol that you can find at any hardware store. To make the shellac dissolve faster, you can pulverize your shellac flakes into a fine powder. I use an old coffee grinder dedicated to this, as it can be hard to clean out the shellac flakes. We're going to make what is called a 2-pound cut, meaning 2 pounds of shellac per gallon of alcohol. We will mix 100 milliliters of alcohol with 24 grams of our shellac flakes ground into powder. I'll add both to a glass jar and shake it occasionally while it dissolves over an hour or two. Once we have our solution, I find it works best to put on one layer of shellac and let it dry before applying our ground layer. I'll use a cotton applicator to thinly dab a coat on, as I find swiping tends to get more fibers than the lacquer. Once it is dried after a few minutes, we can take some chalk and pour in enough shellac to make a paste. We will want to mix this very well and apply it immediately, or it will quickly dry out. I like to apply a pretty thick layer to get a nice ground for our paint. I'll use the applicator to more or less dab on the chalk shellac ground and let it level itself out. This layer will take quite a while to dry and must be completely cured before paint is applied, or it will easily peel off. One trick is to make a small test piece at the same time as your real piece so you can use the test piece to check if it is cured. I'll let this cure for a few more hours before making our paint. Now that our ground is finished curing, we can go ahead and make our paint. To make our paint, we will first need to prepare our hide glue. I have hide glue granules here that I'm going to mix with hot water at a ratio of 1 part glue to 10 parts water. I like to keep mine warm on an electric griddle that I use for encaustics and stir occasionally while the granules hydrate, melt, and dissolve into glue. After about 30 minutes to an hour, the glue should be nearly ready to use. I use a small dedicated encaustic cup, but mini muffin tins, metal lids, or small ceramic bowls also work. As a general rule, don't use art supplies in anything you will use for food after. I'll pour some of our glue into a container where we will mix our paint. We have to keep it warm the whole time or it will quickly solidify into a gelatin-like consistency. Once I have enough glue, I will add the same amount of our Han purple pigment. I will mix it with a brush, but cotton swabs also work. I'll mix the pigment just so that it is coated in the glue. Usually I find it incorporates much better if I let it sit for a couple of minutes. Once it has rested, I will use my brush to mix it again. If there is a difference in particle size from hand grinding the pigment, some of the pigment will float to the top. Here, the red cuprous oxide, since it is a much finer and hydrophobic pigment. The coarser Han purple will likely sink to the bottom. I'll mix the glue as much as possible, trying not to incorporate too much air and get the pigments more evenly dispersed. Usually we would mull our pigments, but this is quite challenging with glue-based paint. If it is too thick, I can add more water or adjust the ratios as needed. This is the consistency we are looking for. And if at any point it hardens or dries out, it can usually be reactivated with more hot water, which is a nice benefit over egg tempera. I'll apply the paint in smooth lines following the direction I want the brush marks to be in. Here, I will move horizontally. The paint will be applied fairly thick, so I will want to work fairly quickly to paint before the glue sets. If there are any air bubbles or thin spots, I'll want to fix those before it cools. I'll work from top down and have a small amount of overlap between the subsequent lines of paint to help blend them. Once I'm finished, I will allow it to solidify and dry. But while we wait, I have prepared here the other colors on the Terracotta Warriors. First, I have Han purple mixed with around 20% cinnabar, which will make it a much more violet color and was used on the sleeves and decorative elements of some of the figures. Here, I have pure cinnabar, which gives a fantastic red that is used in a lot of China's lacquerware, and it was mainly used on the shoes of the warriors. Here I have some red lead mixed with bone white that was used for the flesh tones of the Terracotta Warriors. Here I have some malachite that was used for the green, especially on the pants of some of the warriors. I have some carbon black that was used for the hair and fine detailing. Here's bone white that was used throughout for skin and detailing. Finally, I have pure azurite used on small cloth detailing such as leg wraps and scarves. With these, we can see the entire palette used by the Qin artisans to paint the terracotta army. How to make blue was a problem that every ancient civilization had to contend with. The earth gives red, yellow, brown, black, white, and even green, but almost never blue. The development of Han blue and Han purple, as well as other ancient blues like Egyptian blue and Maya blue, gives us a window into the past where artists had to also be scientists, engineers, and technicians. To make Han purple and Han blue in particular require rare materials, precise temperature control, and advanced manufacturing. It is a color that existed for only a narrow band of time and was lost for almost 2,000 years. For most of this time, we thought the Terracotta Warriors were a somber reminder of a black and white past. Now, we know through the work of many archaeologists, material scientists, artists, historians, and countless others that the past was rich in color, and humanity has long valued and worked tirelessly to create art, sculpture, and honor the dead. Through understanding how materials are made, we understand more on how they are used, how they can be conserved, and the great lengths artists and scientists have gone to create, preserve, and restore great works of art and engineering.